If you're on a 125, you'll know that you don't really have a lot of power to waste. Even losing 5% of your power is going to make a measurable difference in your day-to-day riding. So here's how to get the most performance out of your 125. First, inflate your tyres correctly. You can find the correct tyre pressure in your owner's manual, and this is going to be probably the single biggest thing you can do to get the most performance out of your bike. Flat tyres are going to cause poor handling, increased fuel consumption, and you're not going to be able to go as fast as quickly. Overinflated tyres can also make it really hard to handle. So check your tyres regularly, at least once a week, make sure they're inflated correctly, and if you're doing anything like carrying heavy luggage or carrying a pillion, you might have to adjust your tyre pressure accordingly. To give you an idea of how big of a difference this makes, I took my bike on some national speed limit dual carriageways recently, and it struggled to even hit 60. When I got home, I realised that my rear tyre was on 9 psi, and I really should have checked before I left because it should be up near 30. When I inflated it again, I got it up to 65 no problems, so this really can make a big impact. While we're on the topic of tyres, another great way to improve the performance of your bike is to get the right tyres for the kind of riding that you're doing. Some tyres are optimised for performance in the rain, whereas some perform better in the dry. Depending on what you're doing and the kind of surface that you're riding on, get the tyres that match that so you can get the most performance out of your ride. If you haven't checked your chain, condition and tension recently, definitely do that. This won't necessarily cause you to lose horsepower, but if you have a really loose chain, then your bike might be a little bit more unresponsive, so you'll go to open it up, but the bike won't actually start moving until it picks up all of that slack. Not only is this dangerous, but it is going to make a noticeable difference while you're riding, so make sure you check and adjust the tension of your chain regularly. If your bike is a little bit unresponsive when you open it up and it kind of feels like you have a loose chain, but you don't, it might be your Cush drives are worn. I replaced the Cush drives on my bike recently. It didn't really make too much of a difference because they weren't really too worn, but if those are worn out, it's going to take a little while for the wheel to start spinning, so the bike's not going to feel as responsive as it can. Another thing is to check, clean, and maybe even change your air filter. This is something that doesn't need changing too regularly, but especially if you've just bought the bike or you've ridden a lot of miles or you've ridden a lot in dusty environments, the air filter can get clogged, leading to less airflow and less performance. You can install a high flow air filter if you want. I'm not sure how much of a difference this will make on a 125, but it might be something that's worth looking into. If you haven't done so in a while, change your oil and oil filter. Old oil won't run as well and will reduce the life and performance of your engine. All of those tips were fairly easy to do and mostly fall into the category of general maintenance rather than upgrades, so it's important to keep on top of your maintenance because, like I said at the beginning of the video, you can't really afford to be losing any power. But what about if you're looking to do some actual upgrades or modifications to your bike? Well, first, you can try and play around with the sprockets. There's lots of information about this online, but if you change the number of teeth, you can play with the acceleration versus the top speed. More or less, you can have more acceleration but lower top speed, or you can increase your top speed but you'll probably have lower acceleration. There's a lot to think about when you're doing this, such as you'll probably have to get a new chain with a different length, especially if you've added teeth and things like that. Your original chain's not going to fit. Also, your clock and your speedometer aren't going to work properly, since the bike won't be able to accurately calculate how fast and how far you've travelled. It's one of those mods that I probably wouldn't bother doing on my 125 because I don't want to lose either acceleration or top speed, so I'll keep it how it is for now. But depending on the type of riding you're doing, this might suit you perfectly. Another upgrade is the exhaust. I made a whole video discussing whether or not it's worth it to upgrade the exhaust on your 125, and I pretty much said on that video it is worth it if you like the look and the sound of it, but don't bother upgrading just for performance. And I still stand by that. You're not going to get much performance out of your bike by upgrading the exhaust, and it's probably not going to be anything noticeable. But technically you can install a lighter exhaust and one that's wider so you can get more air out of the bike, but this probably has to be paired with a remap for you to actually see any benefit from upgrading your exhaust. But if you're willing to put a few £100 into your bike and you're willing to get an exhaust and a remap, then you probably can squeeze a little bit of power out of your bike, but it's not going to be anything too drastic. My last mechanical thing on this list is to check your brakes. Make sure they're in good condition, but also make sure they're not binding anywhere. Obviously, if one of your brakes is binding, you're not going to be able to go as fast since you're literally braking as you're riding. Personally, I think the best way to go about getting the most performance out of your bike is just to stay on top with general maintenance, especially tyres and tyre pressure, because it's the most inexpensive way to make a huge difference on the performance and handling of your bike. The other mods like sprockets, exhaust and air filters all cost money, and they're going to cost quite a bit, and it might not be worth it. You might be better off just saving that money and putting it towards a new bike, but there are a lot of 125s out there that could be performing better just because the owner hasn't kept up with normal maintenance on their bike. If you have any other tips, I'd love to hear them, so let me know in the comments. In the meantime, safe riding, and I'll see you guys in the next one.